Hey, good afternoon. Happy Friday.
What's
Well,
going on, man? Happy Friday.
yeah, welcome. Hey, we've couple of things. So I've been told that I don't do enough of an introduction to what is the podcast about. So I'm going to just give a quick little blurb that basically I started listening to podcasts and I started a Fitbit and we did this yesterday. So I'm kind of ad-libbing here. I listened to David Goggins. He talked about, being able to do so much more. I got started doing the walking, and as I think you remember, I walked the circumference of the earth by the time
Yep.
I was 50, 25,000 miles roughly. I'm just about ready to hit 35,000 miles at 10 years. And the spirit of this is I'm having conversations with humans until you. Um, and Pat and I met a long time ago. Pat and I was prepping for this, and I have notes. I'll pull them out of my pocket here in a second. Um, 2022 at VeeCon, we did my first ever podcast. So you were the guy that I did this the first time with. I think I've gotten better, so you'll be able to.
And it never aired. That's the thing.
I'm
So
working.
obviously it was good because it never even aired.
It's the best podcast that was never heard. We have the ability, I think, to do like the whatever you call it, like when guys would like release B sides or whatever. We'll do like the hidden diaries of you and I talking in 2022, and a lot of it was like around NFTs and was like, where's the market going? And it was just really cool to kind of listen back to it and say, were we prophetic? Were we pathetic? What was it that came out
Yeah.
of that, and where are we today? So
It's pretty
I'm
amazing if you think all that's happened in the last 3 years. I'm pretty sure it'd be more on the pathetic side because who could have ever guessed where things would be today? You know?
well. So you and I learned and found each other in 1992. U.S. Navy, spent some time together, stayed friends, reconnected, and as I said, met back up and have attended all three VCons together. I think that's probably worth a merit badge, or at least like the one that we got was the yellow and the red one that everybody got. I can't remember what they called that one. Um, I digress. We met a long time ago. We did this. I'm excited to talk to you. The spirit of the podcast is walked a long time, walked around the earth, continue to walk, use it as a form of going to school, learning, listening, trying to hear, trying to hear perspectives, trying to, get incremental improvements out of life. And I think in talking to you, and one of the things I wrote down was, being able to take care of yourself. That was one of the high topics.
Yep.
And where I was going with that is, as we both have had children and as adults and remain friends, I think one of the big focuses we both had is, our kids being able to, and this was the other note I wrote down, even if they didn't understand, approve, get along, like the person that was running the program, there was always something to be learned from that person.
Yep. I would agree
And
with that.
yeah, and I was gonna say I think we were both kind of that way, and I think there's a lot of benefit that comes out of that, and i.e., where I got to the taking care of myself as I was in anticipation of our first attempted podcast. I had just cooked myself up like this special sandwich with a fried egg on it and cheese, and then it was just delicious. And I'm like, man, a lot of people go like buy some fast food or they go buy whatever. And I think and I don't know if it was just because of the way we were raised or going in the military and having to take care of ourselves, whatever, but we just got to the point where being able to feed yourself is very important, and it's this cool skill to have.
Yep. Hey, by the way, I'm going to move this a little bit because this surfer that I have in the picture behind me, I realize since I'm sitting right like this, looks like it's a piece of hair that's coming
Well,
out. So
I
no,
was gonna say you are the alfalfa
it
of
was
my.
like it was kind of a little bit weird. What's that?
I was gonna say you're the alfalfa in my life.
Exactly.
Please make the camera angle as appealing as possible.
All right. All right. I'm getting over it. All right. So that's enough.
All right. Now, I guess the point I was going to hope you would comment on is, sort of where did you get the life skill of desiring and then learning and then maintaining the ability to take care of yourself?
I mean, I think it's a work in progress. I was the youngest child in my family, so there's a certain element of that. Of by the time my parents got to me, I was probably a little bit more was given a little bit more leash than my brother and sister that are older than me.
Okay.
So I think a little bit of it starts maybe as far back as that, and the fact that a third child usually is has to learn to, they're not coddled maybe as much as a first or second. So but I think it's been a lifelong process as far as taking care of yourself. Obviously, I grew up in a family with both my parents working, so I didn't grow up in a situation where I had a mom staying at home that was waiting for me when I got home from school or anything like that. I grew up in a
Okay.
family where even during the summer, from a very young age, because my sister was 7 years older than me, my mom and dad both went to work. So in the summer, even when I was young, we were at home kind of by ourselves. Like that's just how it was back then. So I don't really remember. And that I love my parents. It's not to say that they didn't do a great job parenting. That's just the reality of the situation. Was probably my 9-year-old sister was tasked with taking care of a 2-year-old me, or very early on, so that both my parents could go to work.
Right. No, it's great. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Sorry about that. Where I was going with that. I had other notes here that I'm going to pull out and make sure that and I do this while I'm walking. And the couple of times a year when it starts to rain here, I'm actually trying to use an umbrella at the same time. So I had other things. I said respect the leader. We talked about that. We did our first ever podcast, talked about that. I had down here, and one of the things is kind of learning to learn from, look at situations of what can I learn from this versus why is this happening to me. I think I've seen that be a big positive thing in your life, and wonder if maybe you might talk about that a little bit there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know in my situation, just to give a little bit of a backdrop to the listeners, I mean, I'm in my 50s now. I've had actually cancer twice in my life. Both times relatively serious. One time was stage 3, and the second time was actually metastatic. And thank God, came out the other side of both those situations. Chemotherapy in both situations, the whole 9 yards, surgery and chemotherapy. So, that type of thing, in addition to just the daily type things, those are the kind of the major things. But you're kind of left with a choice. Like, do you curl up in a corner and, kind of give up, or ask, why is this happening to me at such an early age? Or do you fight the cancer and also learn from that situation and maybe change your life a little bit as a result? In both of those situations, I feel like in retrospect, I learned a lot going through that and came out of both those situations a better human being than I was when I went in. So those are major things. And hopefully nobody listening to this is going through that. It's a horrible thing. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But I think you're also faced with many versions of that every single day in your life, whether it's, a situation going on with your spouse, with one of your kids, with a boss, with a coworker, to where, um, you could essentially go on defense and sort of fight back against whatever's happening to you, or you could try to step back and understand it so that you can figure it out. I think one of the places I probably learned that, quite honestly, is when we used to work together in the Navy. I mean, both of us did a job on the aircraft carrier flight deck that was called a troubleshooter. And a troubleshooter, essentially, from the time the jet starts till the time it launches off the front of the aircraft carrier, is responsible if anything goes wrong to figure out what it is and fix it on the fly.
Right.
So you don't, and we're talking minutes. You have minutes to make things happen. So you don't have a chance to really be upset because something. It's just you have to deal very quickly with the reality of what's going on and figure out a solution or figure out a way around it. And I would say that experience in the Navy really shaped a little bit of how, when problems arise, I look for, okay, what's the next step? What's the next path? What's the next way around this? Versus being bogged down at, why is this problem happening? That doesn't get you anywhere. Like, you and I could have stood on the flight deck and asked, why did that radar system on the F-18 break? And that wasn't going to fix anything, and it wasn't going to get that plane in the air.
I think you might have helped me with my marriage. I've completely, I don't want to say I've blocked some of that out, but I forget at times that we were put in situations where it was like, I hate to say do or die, but it was like, hey, you got to make this decision and stand behind your decision and go to the next, thing.
Yeah.
Because if not, people's lives were on the friggin' line. Sorry, make sure I'm doing this in the rated G.
No,
But
I mean,
I forgot about that.
not only were people's lives on the line, if you did the wrong thing, somebody could die, but also just getting your job done. Like, you in order to successfully complete your job, you didn't have time to, you know, you didn't have time to read a manual. You didn't have time to, like, you had enough time to be like, I've got to pull from the reservoirs of my brain and I've got to problem solve. And sometimes that was something by the book, and sometimes it was somewhat innovative, on the spot, pragmatic, how do we make this happen type things, like, that wouldn't necessarily be anything that you would have been taught. And one of the things I think about, there was a particular box, and not to get down a rabbit hole on F-18s, but there was a particular box that needed to be keyed in order for a plane to be able to take off, so that the aircraft and the ships could identify whether the plane was either a friendly plane or an enemy plane. And this box had a bunch of pins in it that were coded via, top secret codes every day. And the problem was, when you keyed this box, there were pins in this box that would sometimes stick.
Yeah.
So if you released it to zero it out, sometimes all the pins wouldn't zero out. And hopefully you guys don't hear this rain. I'm actually on a back patio area, and there's rain coming down. But anyway, to get back to the story real quick, sometimes the pins wouldn't all release and reset. So the fix of that, when you're on the flight deck in the heat of it, is to pull this box out, walk to the back tire of the jet, and take this box and smack it on the tire, which would allow these pins to all reset so you can rekey it. And 99 out of 100 times, that would be the fix. You will not find that solution in any manual you would have ever read on how to fix that problem. But it was one of those things you learned to quickly identify what was wrong, come up with a solution, and implement it. And I think that skill set has carried with me through my life in a variety of ways.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. And as I said, I appreciate that, because sometimes I look at it and I'm, and we've made kind of a joke out of it. And the code is, I don't need you to fix this for me. Like, you're literally, as soon as she has any sort of an issue or question or problem, I'm troubleshooting it. I'm like triaging, I'm fixing, hey, this is the quickest way for us to do it. And, or this might not be the quickest way, but this might be the most economic, and, or this might be the one that hurts your your pride the least. So I appreciate that. And you're right. They didn't
No,
teach
and
us
I
that. Where,
think
where,
that
where do you think that's, where do you think that skill was grown out of us? Was that a boot camp thing? Was that going through A school? Was that being in the shop with the senior guys and listening to them tell stories? How did we get to that point?
um I mean, I think a lot of it is just trial by fire. I think that um you never know what you're capable of until you're put to the test. Unfortunately, a lot of people never put themselves in a situation where they can discover what they're capable of because they live within, like, that is not a situation that the majority of people are ever in, where you're literally like, this has to happen and you need to make, like, you usually have more time to think. And a lot of times,
Right.
if we're honest, we typically wouldn't have chosen to put ourselves in one of those situations. So a lot of times it's like taking the kid that doesn't know how to swim and throwing them into the deep end of the pool and saying, you're going to figure it out. I mean,
Right.
and I don't know that there's any way you can go to a class to learn that. I think it's, you learn it by doing it.
Is that taking somebody in, I think both of us went to like camps and stuff like that. Is that a camp thing? Is that, you said throw them into the deep end of the ocean? I've started to have these conversations with some of my kids that are in their 30s, so I don't want to call them kids, but the youth. And I'm having these conversations, and it leads me into sort of, we need as humans to get bruises, to get a few
Yes.
small scars, to run into the table, to be put in uncomfortable situations where you have to explain it, why you did what you did, and nobody's going to get you get out of jail free card. We've become too soft and passive. And the problem, or where I'm trying to strike a chord, is what's enough. I don't want somebody to lose a finger or toe or something like that, but what's enough? How do we get back to letting kids learn?
I think, in all defense of the kids, a lot of people like to be like, these kids of this generation. And it's like, you know what? We need to point the finger at ourselves because we're the adults that raised these kids. Like,
Yes.
they are a creature of the way that they were raised. And I think
Yep.
if you look, imagine like what I said, the way I grew up with my sister watching me at a very young age, because both my parents worked, that would be unheard of today, that somebody
Yep.
would let their 9-year-old watch their 2-year-old. I
Yep.
mean, it just wouldn't happen. So I think we as parents have, in an effort to try to help our kids, have actually hurt our kids in a way. And I don't blame them. I blame us,
Right.
to be frank.
And I feel the same way. Is there a way for us to have an effect? Like, is it too late and we have to ride the roller coaster till we get off at the end? I mean, is there a way for us, as both of us are parents? I'm a grandparent. I'm going to say 5 to 7 years away from being a grandparent. You're welcome. And I,
Maybe a little
I'm,
longer than that, hopefully. But anyway,
yeah, but how do we as, and I'm bringing this on. This is a lack of ego. This is
yeah.
you and me, right of passage, right of responsibility. And if I get in here and my sound goes out, please tell me. We're elders. We're the elders of this
Yeah.
thing. You've been through cancer. I've been through, things. We've both been through, enough that we're not sitting around the fire with a peace pipe, but we're around the fire talking to the kids. Like, how do we make a difference?
I think that some of it is allowing, even when you have the ability to prevent it, allowing our kids to fail. I think we want to, specifically as parents, to, good example of this is, my son who plays sports. In fact, tonight after our podcast, I'm running stats for his high school lacrosse team that he's on. And there's been some times like last year, he was a sophomore and he didn't make the varsity team. And, one, I'm never a parent that's going to complain about things like that. It's just not how I'm
Right.
wired. But
Yep.
two, I use that to be like, good. What are you going to do about it? Like to my son Enzo, I'm like, are you going to go out in the back? Are you going to, use the bounce back board? Are you going to, do some different things to get better? You can allow this situation to either really upset you or you could use it as fuel. I think a lot of times, I'll give you a quick example. One of my college professors, who I'm still somewhat close with, we still are connected with each other after all these years. I was on campus one day talking to her, and she said, "You wouldn't believe how different it is today than when you were in college, Pat." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "When you were in college, I never got phone calls from parents." She's like, "Now I field regular phone calls from parents that are complaining about the grade that their child got." We're talking about college age kids, and their parents are still calling into a college professor, a PhD professor, to argue and complain that their kid should be getting a better grade. I feel like, now you asked me like what we could do about it, but I do think that that's just an indication that we as parents have not allowed our kids to fail. I mean, we have stepped in when need be to avert failure. And I think now, even as they get older, there's times my son did something pretty boneheaded when he first got his driver's license and ended up getting in an accident. Thank God nobody was hurt.
Right.
But he had been saving money from birthdays and things like that for a long time. And he had some money put away in the bank. And because it wasn't an accident, he had done something that was pretty stupid that ended up resulting in the accident. My wife and I made him pay for all the stuff to get the car repaired, the
Okay.
deductibles and all that. And that inflicted some pain on him because he likes to see his bank account grow. That
Right.
was one of those situations where we could have easily just said, "Hey, it's one of those things, you're 17-year-old kid, what?" But we were like, he needs to feel the pain, because if he does, he might not do this again. And in fact, on top of that, he lost, obviously, the freedom that comes along with having his own car and being able to drive. And I happen to know the guy that was repairing it. So I told him, "Take your time repairing it. I want him to feel not having that car for a while, because I need him to feel the pain of that." And so when you ask what you can do, I feel like there's, dozens of opportunities every week to allow our kids to feel the pain of their decisions. The only way you learn is by understanding that was a bad decision and some pain came along with that. Therefore, I'm going to modify my behavior to not feel that pain again.
I appreciate it. I mean, I really do think that it's something, and I look back at myself. Tad, you've watched me. Tad's 26 years old. I mean, he's still my baby kid, and I always wanted all of them to have as good a life, and that whole motto of trying to be better than what our parents gave us, and all that. And there was a time where I think he had like in lunch detention for like 37 days straight or something like that. And I went in and I remember this whole thing, and I want him to feel pain. And I'm like, I think at day 14, you probably would have known that this was not working. Maybe we could have come up with a different thing. But anyways, I guess my point was really I'm hearing you, and I believe it is good, and I think it would be better for us if we could allow them to and when I hear what you're saying and take pain, I relate that, and I think that of some sort of a consequence for their actions.
Well, and it doesn't even have to be a bad thing. I'm going to probably bring up a controversial topic that some people will disagree with me about, but I just had a discussion with one of the coaches on the lacrosse team the other day, and we were talking about things. And eighth place trophies have done this country and these children no favors.
Zero.
When I grew up, the first and maybe the second place team in your league or whatever, or your high school conference or whatever, might get a trophy. And if you didn't get that, it sucked. And guess what that did? It drove you, if that bothered you, it drove you to be like, we're going to get better as a team. We're going to come back next year stronger, better, faster.
Yep.
And when everybody walks away everybody walks away with a ribbon and everybody's told good job, and it's like, what do you mean good job? We got shelled 18-2 out there today. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like,
Right.
it wasn't a good job. It wasn't a good job. You know what I mean?
Is that because we're afraid of competition? How do we continue to peel? You and I were having this conversation. How do we peel the onion back? Why did it be important to tell them that they were doing a good job? Because they didn't like losing? I mean, I don't understand.
I mean, I think there's this, it's all wrapped up in this weird feeling of self-confidence. Like, we want the kids to be confident, but it's like, in order to really gain true confidence, you have to learn from mistakes. So when you
Right.
remove the mistakes from it, they really don't have true confidence. They have this false sense of confidence that can easily get, sooner or later, they're an adult or something really happens and it can get shattered because they realize that, it's that their confidence wasn't based on
Ability.
their ability or, so I think that a lot of that comes down to, and I'm not one of these guys that, winning is everything and second place is the first loser. I hate to keep going back to my son's lacrosse game, but 2 nights ago they played a rival and the game was an excellent game. It came down to the last 2 seconds of the game, and our guy scored. With 2 seconds left to tie the game up. And we ended up going into triple overtime, very hard fought battle. And unfortunately, we ended up losing in the third overtime. And I told all those kids that it was a good game, because at that point, it's like, hey, sometimes people lose, like, they played a good game and it just turned out that on that particular day, they came out on the losing end. Now, if they lost 18-2, I wouldn't be lined up to tell them you had a good game, because it's like, you got, so I feel like you have to, as a parent, understand where, that point is, or as a boss, even, you have to understand where that point is, to where you can spur them along to greater achievement, or where you can crush their spirit. And I don't think what you want to do is crush their spirit. But I don't think you're doing them any favors by, in order to not crush their spirit, you never critique them at all.
Right. Well, and I think it brings back to what I heard you say is, hopefully, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, cool. It's raining pretty good in my camera, but it's just great over. I think what I heard you say and what I've grown to learn is obviously perspective, but the other word that's big is nuance. Like 18-2 and triple overtime are 2 different stories. Like, that's 2 different, they're both an L, in the black and white world of, hey, we got a W or we got an L. Hey, you still got it. And at the same time, I'm hoping that where they're feeling that, like, there's, to your point, there's some pride in that, right?
And then in that situation, like you said, I mean, in that situation, a hard fought battle, they don't need you. Like, they already probably feel like, in that situation, I think we all felt gutted when that happened. So,
right.
I tried to not give them false praise as they were coming off the field. And I was talking to them. I tried to give them praise, like, hey, man, there was two critical times where we needed you to clear the ball at the end, and you really did a good job clearing it. Like, try to find something where you can say, hey, although we lost this game, we really needed you to clear the ball twice in overtime, and you freaking did an awesome job clearing that. Like, try to like, so I think that, man, I do feel like there was something lost, and I'm not sure when it happened, when there was this everybody's a winner, because that's not how life works. I mean, sooner or later they're going to get out and they're going to go to apply for a job, and 100 people are going to apply, and somebody's going to get hired and they're not. There are winners and losers once you're out there operating in this world. Like, that people do get select, like, that does happen. So if you don't teach your kids how to deal with losing, and the difference between winning and losing, and how to deal with a loss, they're going to face it sooner or later. And I never want to hear my kids say that's not fair. It's kind of like, to a certain extent, life's not fair. What are you going to do about it? Like, what are you going to do? Like, when we were working on jets, what are you going to do to diagnose the problem and find a solution? Because you sitting in this place of that's not fair does nobody any good.
Agreed. And I would call that lack of coping skills. Like, you need to be able to give them the ability to cope with a loss, to find their way through, to look for ways to, inspect their game and make their game better. If you just smooth all that over, there's, a 4 or 5 step process that gets neglected. And then eventually you're an adult and you're in college and your parents are calling your instructor because they don't like your grades. I mean, it's a downhill slope.
I think that, I mean, back, we've talked about it, but back to your original question, what can we do about that? I think within the sphere of influence that you have over young people that are growing up, I think, finding ways to allow them to experience, some pain when it's warranted, I think allows them to sort of understand, like, how to cope with that and how to get better. Like, the thing I say to the thing I look back at, and I think, even with my kids, I've not done a perfect job parenting at all, but I don't feel like that a lot of the kids I'm involved with that play sports and things like that, maybe this is healthy. Maybe I'm wrong here, but they don't hate losing like we did when I played. Like, if we hated losing, and I think
Yeah.
a lot of that is because even when they lost, they still got a ribbon, they still got so they don't like. We grew up, it's like, and again, a hard fought battle. Sometimes you get a loss. I'm not one of those people that's like, hey, you've always got to win.
Right.
But, like, a loss should fuel you to be like, man, I hated the way that felt. Like, we're spend an extra hour in practice this week, whatever. Like, I don't want to feel that again.
Yeah. I think I wanted it and believed when I was, because I hated to lose. I mean, I think my kids would tell you that that's the way dad was, and how we grew up. And I've tried to learn, and in the world we're in, to be able to say, hey, you don't win or lose, you win or learn. And I try to gain from it. And at the end of the day, I think there's a couple things. I talked to my new boss. He talked about Chris Voss, and I read the book about Never Split the Difference. He's a hostage negotiator.
Yeah.
You never want just the hand, like, you
Yeah.
want the whole person. And we were kind of talking through that. And I think that's kind of back to this whole situation, is we've just made it so easy. And I think coping, negotiation, but how do you get that hate to lose spirit back? Like, and I don't know if it's, maybe that's way the pendulum all the way back the other way, but at least there'd be a discomfort. And when I did the Corey Hunter interview, we talked about it, and he talked about, hey, the kids would get done with the game, and I was the old guy in the dugout, and I'd grab all their phones away from them, and then I put in a 15-minute before, after every loss, before you could touch your device, because I wanted you to, to kind of sit in it. And maybe that's it. Maybe it's we need to, during a loss, maybe sit there and sort of not beat them up, but do more of an analysis of, hey, where could we have, sharpened our axe a little bit better versus, hey, it's just great you put the effort in. Go, here's your juice box.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's again, and here's where the nuance comes in. Every kid's different too. Some kids thrive on tough love, thrive on that. And some kids, you could just feel it if you're a sensitive adult. Like, man, a little bit of critique could absolutely crush them. It's
Yep.
like, it's not a one size fits all game. Like,
Right.
it's like, um, I mean, it's so. I mean, it again. What we can do about it, because I think we've identified that something did change, but then the question is, okay, did we lose a whole generation? And I don't think that we did. I think we just have to, I think we have to, even as a government, whether it's parents, I'll take it all the way up to the government level. We have to let people feel the consequences and the responsibility of the decisions they make.
Agreed.
I'm not saying there's not situations where things are outside of somebody's control and we need to have programs and assistance and things like that. But
Right.
often, people are in a situation they're in based on decisions they made. And sometimes they need to sit in that, to your point, for a little bit, not just be rescued from it.
Yeah, I know. It's sitting in it for, hey, this is back to your word, pain. This is, hey, this is a lesson. This is where I could have made a different decision. So I may do some self-reflection. Maybe I find out, hey, this is not an area of my life where I want to spend a lot of, I shouldn't be a gambler. I shouldn't do X, Y, Z, maybe something just from it you kind of learn out of it. But
Yeah,
anyways,
or just like, I mean, I'm a very empathetic person. I like to think of myself as very empathetic to a degree. Like, I'm all for helping somebody, giving somebody a hand up, but not 15 hands up. Like, at some point, that person has to take responsibility for, I'm all about giving them a hand up, but then let's move forward. Let's learn from that and let's move forward. Let's not live in that spot and continue to be a victim. Like, let's get you out of that spot. That doesn't, I mean, I'd like to think that I'm not, again, and I'm not saying that there's not, of course, there are special circumstances, things like that need to be addressed. But often, we're in a situation where where, quite frankly, we don't want somebody to pay not the ultimate price, that would be death, but we don't want
right.
somebody to necessarily pay the price for, I could lose some weight. I should be out walking like you are, but I'm also not a person, and I'm not, no judgment, I'm not a person that's going to take a drug to artificially, like, what, I need to just exercise more and eat better and lose weight. Like, to
Right.
me, we've created a society where the solutions are all easy. The solutions are all take a pill, do this, and I think that, again, that doesn't do us any favors. I need to feel the pain of not being happy with the way my clothes fit, things like that, before I'll be like, all right, enough of the pain. I will go and start eating better and go and start exercising. There's an element, even among me, like, forget pointing at
Yeah.
everybody else. I'll point right at myself.
No, I hear you. And as we're both saying, we're trying to do all these caveats. We're talking about just kind of in a spirit of normalcy. Yes, everything. I think everything that we as domesticated wild animals or highly educated apes that we've used as tools to assist our fellow ape in possibly being a better version of themselves, every one of those things has been turned into some sort of shaming tool or that hurts their feelings, or it's like, well, yeah, we want them to feel bad, so they'll go do something different, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I see the change.
Well, and again, with all due, like, there are situations people are in because they grew up in a home where they were abused or whatever. There
Right.
are outliers of what we're talking about. I'm not
Right.
talking about like, hey, suck it up. Everybody should just, get a
Yes.
stiff upper lip and move on. There are legitimate situations that people need help to walk through.
Yes.
But there are also, probably for every one or two of those, there are 7 or 8 that it's just we don't want to feel the pain. We want the easy way out.
Right.
So, I mean, and I think, you know, how do we change that? Is I think we have to allow people to begin to a certain extent feeling the pain of their decisions. Like back to the analogy of my son with that car accident. He made a left turn at a time of the day when you're not supposed to make a left turn. There's a big sign that says no left turn at this time of the
Right.
day, but he was with a
Right.
group of friends and he thought he was going to be cool and he made a
Yep.
left turn and ended up getting hit by a car. And I was like, okay, you're paying for the deductible and all the other things that come along with it.
Yep.
And like I said, he needed to feel like, dude, this wasn't a mistake that you made because you're inexperienced. If he made a mistake, a dog ran out in the road, he
Right.
by instincts tried to avoid it and he ended up in a wreck, I would have treated the whole situation differently. He knowingly made him a bad decision that resulted in a bad outcome, and he needed to feel some pain from that to make sure that he doesn't make a stupid decision like that again, or hopefully doesn't make a stupid decision like that again.
Yeah. Enzo, I love you. I hope you don't make a stupid decision like that again.
Yeah. But I mean, my point is that's where I said I don't know that there's a one size fits all thing. Even in that situation, the nuance of the situation dictated that I would have probably treated him differently based on the situation. I mean, there's no here's how we fix it. I don't know. I think it's in one interaction at a time between human beings is how you fix it.
I
You
agree.
know?
Back to yeah, no, I agree. So not to end this on a down note, let's bring it on a positive note. You've not only survived, but you thrived through cancer twice. And it was one of the things that was on my list, but you brought it up and I'll bring us back. You could have been one of those people that, hey, this is happening to me. I lived with it with you. You were not that person. Um, I'm seeing some changes in some of the things you're doing in your life. So without, giving anything away, has there been any like I learned this lesson and this is the major shift that I'm gonna do in my life or how maybe it's the glasses I look at things through. Has there been anything that's like I think a lot of people are in their 20s and 30s that'll be listening to this. So is there anything as you look through that lens and look through the gratitude I've survived and I've thrived through this? This is what I'd do sooner. I'd start the business sooner. I would travel the world and not worry about debt. I would what's the biggest thing you've learned?
Um, this is going to sound super cliche, but I mean, it's absolutely true. You know, you have to look at like we live our lives, all of us do, myself included, and I fight it even now after these situations. We live our lives as if we have some guaranteed amount of time. If we're 20, we think we're going to live to be 80, 90. If we're 50, we think we got another 30 years, whatever it is. I just attended last night a funeral. My nephew's wife died suddenly in her sleep at 34 years old. No other health issues. We're not guaranteed the next day at all. So, I happen to be a person of faith. So I look at that and say, hey, that should dictate how we should live our lives. But the other thing is, I just feel like the things we spend a lot of our life, a lot of our energy, a lot of our time chasing, spend time making sure the things that you're chasing are things worth you're whatever, however, if you live to 100, you live to 50. We all have a certain currency that we have called time.
Yep.
And we spend that currency on working at a job, making money, starting a business, doing that. We every single day we spend a little bit of that currency. We don't know how much of it we have left. All I would say is, without being preachy or anything, is make sure what you're spending your currency on is what's the most valuable thing to you. Because for me, I found going through this that for a lot of my life, I was chasing things that really didn't matter. And when I got that second bout of cancer and I was sitting in that hospital room, and for about 3 days, the exact extent of my cancer wasn't known.
Right.
And I was given the two sides of the coin of either there is a path of treatment we can follow, or you probably have somewhere around 18 months to live. And I had to sit with that for 3 days, not knowing which side of that coin was going to come up. I can promise you that I wasn't worried about what kind of car I wanted to buy. I can promise you I wasn't worried about what new watch I wanted to buy or anything like that. I was concerned about things like, have I spent enough time with my kids? Have I invested enough in my kids to where they can be productive adults? Have I said what I needed to say to the people that really matter to me enough? Uh, and again, this sounds cliche, a lot of it, but and I think I'd love for people to know, if I could talk to a 20-year-old, I'd be like, man, if there's a way that you can somehow grasp that at 20 and not have to go through something life threatening, man, that just changes the whole way you live your life. I mean, it literally changes everything. I mean, again, I now run stats for my son's high school lacrosse team. Prior to this happening, I probably would have been out. I'm too busy for doing that. And those 2 hours lacrosse games going on, I could make $500 or whatever the case may
Yeah, yeah.
be. Like in my mind, I was like, I felt like I had other things to do. Even if I was watching the game and was there, I was on my cell phone, I was texting people, doing like I wasn't fully there. I was
Right.
partially there. So if I had to say one thing is now I try, I'm not always perfect, but I try when I'm in a situation like even like this, talking to you, I try to be fully there. Whatever I'm doing, however I'm investing my time, I try to be all in, whether that's 5 minutes.
Yep.
If I'm talking to a kid after a game or something like that, for those couple minutes, I try to be all there. Like I try to be, this is, fully invested. And I think that to me is, I want to make sure that how I'm spending, and hopefully I have decades and decades left, but I want to make sure going forward how I spend my time is doing things I truly value. And I think as you get older too, if I were speaking to my kids or 20-year-old, what I would say, you'll find out. I was an economics major. There's something in
Yep.
economics called the law of diminishing returns.
Yep.
And I think you'll find out that once you have a couple nice things, couple nice cars, couple nice apartments or homes, you find out that th- with each additional step, you extract less and less satisfaction out of it. At some point in time, you're just like, man, I thought this would bring me more joy, or I thought that, and the reality is a lot of times we give up a lot to achieve those things. And achieving things is a great thing. I'm not taking anything away, but I think you just have
Nope.
to weigh the costs. The old school vision, symbolism of putting things on a scale. You need to say, okay, I want to have a new BMW M5 in the next 5 years. And then you need to think about what you got to put on this side of the scale to balance that. And is it worth it? Is the juice worth the squeeze?
It's one of those things, back to, I'm not sure, and I'm glad and thank you for sharing that. I'm not sure that the people that hear this will fully appreciate that over time. I think it will grow the diminishing returns. For me, I figured out and became a one car family back in 2021, and it, we could have three cars. It's I prefer to be outside walking and doing what I'm doing. This is how I want to identify, and it the 5 times a year that we really really truly need a second car, they created an app called Uber, and we're more than able to take care of ourselves. So I try to take the positives of the technology. I appreciate that. I think I take it a little bit farther in that we talked a little bit yesterday about sort of that bank of stress, and the stress bank takes on the takes some of the dollars that could go into your longevity tank, which makes your analysis a lot more relevant to this conversation. Is the juice worth the squeeze? Is that job worth it? We both have a love of Gary, and he brought us some joy together, and he talks about that. The people that are making millions that are miserable, and the kids that are making 75 grand a year and are happy as a clam.
I think it's one of the best things. A lot of times it's not the soundbite that people play from Gary, but I think it's one of the best things that Gary Vaynerchuk talks about is, you need to figure out what that is in your life, what is going to make you happy. And going and being quote unquote successful by the world terms and making X amount of dollars or whatever may make you miserable, but making a living wage doing something you love may make you happy. And I think we talk too much about success in the terms, and I think this is one of the things he really talks about that I love. We talk about success in terms of what the world classifies success, and success should really be classified in terms of happiness. If you are happy, you got it. Like that's the ultimate currency. Like if you have $5 million in the bank and you're miserable, you're poor. If you have $5,000 in the bank and you're happy and jump out of bed every day thrilled about what you're doing, you're rich. That's not the way the world looks at it, but that is you, especially when you face down the barrel something like going through a cancer diagnosis or something, you realize that very quickly. Like Steve Jobs, you think about at the end of the day, how many of his dollars do you think he would have given up to be cured? Every one of them.
Every single dollar.
One of them. Exactly.
Yep. No, there's some really good stuff that he put out as he was ending, and he was putting things into perspective. And yeah, I totally agree. I think we emphasis in dollars and that being your value. We put our identity in having a job versus not having a job, and how much that job pays you. And I think having a job that is either rewarding or gives you some sort of joy, or that you can do that is helping other people versus having a Lamborghini. I'm just, yeah, I'm we're in different places, and that's why we're having this conversation, is to share with those that are still sort of in that, they're the bull and they're seeing that red deal, and we're trying to let them know, hey, some of those commercials or the cartoons that we watch, they had an animal behind that red thing. So don't always just run right to the red thing,
Well, and again, that being prefaced with saying, you got somebody that's wired like Gary, and he's wired to, like, what he truly enjoys is building a business. And there's very big financial rewards that come along with that. But if you've ever spent any time with Gary at all, like both of us have, you realize very quickly that he's not doing it for the financial rewards at all. And that's not why, that's not his why. Now, because of what he does, there are financial rewards that come along with it. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with making money if you're pursuing your dreams and you're happy with what you're doing. Where it becomes wrong is when you start trading away your dreams. You start trading away your happiness to make more money. And I think you'll realize at some point in time that that's not a trade worth making. Oh, I think we might have lost you. You're frozen up. Oh, there you are. I think you're back.
I can hear you again. Yeah, we're both back.
So I just said,
I was hearing you. You were modulating out. So yeah.
oh, no,
Sorry.
I said, I think as you get older, if you're doing what you love and you're following your dreams and you're making a lot of money, that's great. But where I think it crosses the line is if you're what I was saying is if you are putting your dreams on hold and you're not happy with what you're doing and you're trading that for money, I think you're going to realize at some point in your life that that wasn't a trade worth making.
And because we talked about it before, I agree 100% and wholeheartedly. I think understanding the juice within the squeeze, understanding lifestyles and, give and take, taking and doing things. I think I hope that someone that wants to go do something goes and does it because they've heard us talking about it. That's what my goal here is. That I think a lot of people talk about it and think about it, but just never go do it. So,
Especially if you're in your
I
20s, like my kids, I'm like, if you're ever gonna like really take a risk and try something, and you really would love to do something, and you think that it might be something you want to do, what better time to try it than in your early 20s, right out of college or something like that? It's like you got all kinds of your life to, my son right now is a junior in high school and he wants to actually he wants to be a welder. That's what he really wants to do. And we've looked around at some colleges that he could go to have like a little bit of the college experience, but also study welding. And the reason I want him to do that is he could certainly go to like an 18-week course and come out and make a lot of money. But I said to him, I'm like, you have your whole life to make, like, I want you to have the experience of going to college and meeting people and expanding the way you think and things like that. I mean, I am worried about both my kids getting a job and being productive, but I'm just saying, like, sometimes I think like him going to an 18-week course, getting his certificates and going out there and welding, he loses something. And it's like, you're going to have the rest of your life to work, like enjoy the season of life you're in at the
yes,
time you're in that season.
yes, and I think for the next time that you and I talk together, I'd love to talk about the downfalls of specialization. Like we used to know how to do anything. Like a human would make his own pair of shoes. He'd do his own thing. He would ever. And then the society grew to a certain extent, and we got into these specialization, engineering. Hey, you got these, and I think it's making us not as quality humans as we have the potential to be.
It's certainly
So
something we could talk about. I think there's a lot of, man, there's a lot to unpack there. But I mean, to end
yes,
this episode out, I just think that, I think, if I had to say one thing of going through this experience, and I'm glad you used the word, that I survived and I thrived, because, when you're in the middle of it, sometimes you don't feel like you're thriving when you're going in the middle of it. But,
right.
um, I think that, I thank God that, I came out of it like the way I did. And I also feel like, there's an element of, you cannot convince me that there's not a connection between how you think with your brain and how your body responds. I think if you get stuck in that situation, people always talk about fighting cancer, and you're like, what do you mean fighting? Like, I walk in, they hook me up to a tube, they put drugs in me. What do you mean fighting? I mean, I'm not like, how do I fight? I think fighting is in here. It's in the head.
Yep.
It's like not letting it get you to the point where you're giving up and you're upset. And it's like, It doesn't mean I know people that have fought very hard and not won the battle. Like I don't want to say they didn't win the battle. They fought hard and they did win because of the way they finished. But I do feel like there's a bigger connection to what is going on here and how that plays out in your life than we even close to understand. And
I
I
think
think
that
that's
I,
go
I
ahead.
think
Sorry.
that I no, you're great. I think that to build onto that, I think, and I talked about this a little bit before, I think when you look at the placebo effect, where people talk about, oh, you're taking a sugar pill, and it's no, you're taking something and putting in your body, and your brain 50 times out of 100 is fixing itself. Like we are so freaking powerful.
Yeah.
Then, power on the top of that, we are our loudest voice. So if you're in your brain as a Debbie Downer, the world is happening to me, you're going to be a different person than if you believe that you have faith and you are going towards this goal. I think it's, yes, your
Just
brain is,
perspective too. I mean,
yes,
you're going through
yes.
a tough situation. Even when I was going through cancer, I was sitting in a room with other people getting chemo, and there's nothing fun about chemo, but I was doing better. And even in that situation, I could express gratitude that it's like, hey, I'd love to not be getting chemo, but you know, I'm grateful for how I'm doing because I realize it could be so much worse. Even in the depths of a bad situation, it could be worse. And for some people, it is. And I think having a perspective, there's very few things anymore in my life that truly get me really fired up because I just realized that from a perspective standpoint, it's like as long as you know my wife, my kids, my family are safe and healthy, the other stuff it'll get figured out. Well,
Yep.
I'm healthy. Well, like there's things like the perspective that comes along with that. I think is because what's that old saying? And I don't even know who said it, but I think it's even been in songs. It's like 99% of the things I worried about never happened anyway. Or what you spend so much of your time worrying about things that don't even happen. You know what I mean? Worrying about things that might happen, and I can't remember. There is a song that's a line in the
There's
song, but I can't
there's
think.
there's multiple there's multiple references to that. The last one that I read was that 85% of what you anxiety for is something that you're worrying about that never happens. Like literally you just putting energy in, and I've tried to boil it down to, if I'm sitting here and I'm worried about something, I'm worrying, and then tomorrow I step off the curb and I get hit by a bus, just wasted a shitload of time on worrying about something that now has never the possibility to happen. I realized that people weren't really getting a positive spin by saying I was stepping off the curb, and so I don't use it as often. But yeah, worrying about something today, when like you just said, it's better to be present with your feet, to be with your situation, to be there, and to give your time fully in, then you don't have to have anxiety. So we'll
Well, and
deal
the
with
other
what's going to happen
part, too,
tomorrow.
I'll tell you what. Well, and again, it's not a perfect thing, but it's helped a lot. Is well, I already mentioned perspective. The other thing that I would say changes a lot is just gratitude. Like, when you realize what your position is compared to other people's situation and are grateful for whatever your situation is, even if it's not good, grateful that it's not and it may be as bad as it could be. And in all those situations you talked about that we worry about, that people worry about, I say to myself, okay, you were worried about a test score or whatever. You got the test back and you did fine on it. Does it like take a moment and eh, eh, pause for a moment of gratitude that, hey, this test came out good. Like sit
Yeah.
in that moment for a second. Like, and understand that it's like too often we worry about something, then it doesn't happen, and we blow right through, and we're on to the next thing that we're worried about. Like
Yeah.
we don't even take a second to be grateful for the thing that we were worried about ended up turning out okay. We're already on to the next worry.
In a fear-driven society, that's just the way it goes. But I answer or say this a lot. I'm a gratitude-driven human. I'm happy every morning I wake up in my pillow. You know, I get up at 5 o'clock. I turn on the coffee. You know, the pot to boil the water for the boiler pour over. I just, yeah. I'm driven, and my focus is to be excited about what I have, not to have problems with what I'm missing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that, those are a couple simple things that I think, perspective and gratitude accomplish a lot. If you have to boil it down to, okay, what do I focus on? Perspective and gratitude will get you a decent amount of the way there. Yeah.
I agree. No, it's great. I'm getting ready to get into another bad zone. I've taken a bunch of your time. We're going to do this again. Really appreciate it. Thank you
No
for
problem.
being here.
Thanks for having me on, man. It's always good to
All
talk
right,
to you.
man.
Take care.
And hey, I love you. Be safe.
Love you too, man. Take care.
All right. See you. Bye.